Expeditions is one of those games that you can make a lot of mistakes. So I have made a list of 20 tips and tricks to help you make less mistakes and make the game easier for you. Tip number 20. Always deploy with 4 trucks. In expeditions, you can choose up to 4 vehicles to deploy. So always make sure you go with 4 vehicles because you're not gonna lose anything, you just have access to more vehicles. And another thing is, make sure you have different types of vehicles. Let's say go with 2 scouts and 2 off-road trucks. In this case, if you wanted to do a contract or a task that requires a truck with sideboard bed, you already have that vehicle on the map, so you don't need to go back to the headquarters again. So always deploy with 4 trucks. It makes completing tasks and contracts easier. Number 19. Complete tasks and contracts at the same time when you're completing an expedition. Sometimes when you're doing an expedition, on your way you see some tasks and contracts, and some of those tasks or contracts are very short. You don't need to do many things to complete them. You just need to look at the map and see what tasks and contracts you have at those locations. So if there is a task or contract near the place that you need to go because for your expedition, make sure you check that out, and if you can, complete that task or contract. But make sure you complete that task or contract. If you complete 1 or 2 stages of that task and you go back to the HQ and come back because of another expedition, that task or contract would reset. Number 18. When you're doing one of those seismic vibrator expeditions, make sure you look at the map before deploying. On that small map before deploying, you can see where you need to go. You can see the area of where you need to go. So make sure you memorize that, and once you deployed, mark that location on the map so you know where you need to go. Because if you have no idea where you need to go and you need to do one of those seismic vibrator expeditions, you're gonna have a very bad time. The next tip is very simple but very useful at the same time. Check where you're deploying before you do it. It sounds simple, but it could save a lot of time. You can see where you need to go on the map before deploying, so make sure you're deploying at the right outpost. Number 16. Hire the manager for longer expeditions. One of the managers allows you to sell all the common items that you have for 30% more money and buy them for 10% less money. So at the end of the day, even if you buy jack screws or anchors all the time, you wouldn't lose that much money. And on longer expeditions, the chances of finding more jack screws or anchors is very high. So if you find 1 or 2 jack screws, you would make all the money back that you spent on hiring the manager and buying jack screws and anchors. And not only that, you get 1 more free evacuation too. So this manager, in my opinion, is very good. The other manager is very good too. Any treasure item that you find, you would sell it for 50% more money. Number 15. Airdrops are your fuel station and repair shops. Whenever you need some extra fuel or repair parts, make sure to go to an airdrop. And whenever you saw an airdrop on your way, just pay a visit to it, refuel your truck, pick up some repair parts, and carry on your trip. The next tip is spend as much time as needed to prepare for your expedition. In this game, it's always better be safe than sorry. So always have jack screws and anchors in your inventory, especially if you're not driving a scout vehicle. All the winches for all scout vehicles are autonomous, so even if your engine is off, you can still use your winch. But having jack screw and anchor is like a guarantee that you're not gonna fail. Other than that, when you're new to a map, make sure you spend a good time exploring. Always use your binoculars every few meters. They are a great help for exploring an area that is unknown, and you can gain a lot of information and find a lot of things. But for places that you can't use your binoculars, make sure you use your drone. Sometimes you need to go up a cliff, but you don't exactly know where to go and how to get up that cliff. That's where your drone comes in handy. And it's the same if you want to go down a mountain or a cliff. Use your drone to find a good spot. Now, another thing is, always before starting your trip, make sure you use the markers on the map and plan your route. With those markers on the map, you always know where you're going and you're not gonna get lost. Number 13. Each vehicle has a recovery fee and you get one free recovery per deployment. So make sure if you wanna recover a lot, go for a vehicle that has a low recovery fee. In expeditions, the sideboard bed works in a way that it's divided into 4 slots and you can store fuel or repair parts on your bed. But something that you need to pay attention to is, if you're going to use one of those slots, for example for repair parts, make sure you have the maximum number of repair parts in that slot. For repair parts, you can have 100 of them in each slot. So make sure you have the maximum number of repair parts. Don't go for 50 repair parts because you're already using a slot for repair parts. Have the maximum amount that you can. Number 11. Turn off the engine when you're using your drone. When you're using binoculars, you can look around very fast, so you don't need to turn off the engine. But when you're using the drone, you might spend more time looking around and finding anything that you want. So it's better to turn off the engine to don't waste any fuel. Number 10. We mentioned all the winches for scout vehicles are autonomous, but off-road trucks have access to autonomous winch too. So make sure once you unlock that, you use it. Alright, the next tip is go down a mountain or a cliff using your winch. You don't always need to use your winch to climb up a cliff or something. You can use it to go down a cliff safely too. For that, you need a winch point. It could be a tree or something, or you could use one of your anchors for this. And because we have the push option for the winch now, you can do it very safe and easy in expeditions. And this is such a good way of saving a lot of time. Now the next tip. Repair parts, repair parts, repair parts. They are actually so useful and important in expeditions. Your vehicle would take a lot of damage when you're driving, especially if you're not 100% careful. So having repair parts is good. And you can use your repair parts for building bridges or clearing out some obstacles. So repair parts are very, very useful in expeditions. Make sure you have a good amount of them, especially if you think you don't need that much extra fuel or you're not going for those really long expeditions or things like that. Just replace the extra fuel with the repair parts. And there is one more reason why repair parts are very good. I'm gonna tell you that in the next tip. I mentioned going down a cliff using your winch, but let's say you don't have any anchors or there are no winch points. One of the things that you can do in expeditions to save a ton of time is to just jump down a cliff. For jumping down a cliff, you need kinda 2 things. If you're lucky and you land on your wheels, and actually so many times you would land on your wheels. Anyway, if you landed on your wheels, then you're good. If you didn't land on your wheels and you don't have autonomous winch, you need jack screws. If you have autonomous winch, you could put your vehicle on its wheels using one of the winch points around you. But another thing that you need, which is very important, is repair parts. That's why I said have a good amount of repair parts. Jumping down a cliff is a great way of saving a lot of time. Alright, the next tip is pre-winch. Sometimes you find yourself at these situations that you're about to drive on some angled or uneven surface that you think you're gonna tip over. In these kind of situations, before you start going, attach your winch to an anchor or a winch point, so if you started to tipping over, you have that winch to save yourself. And because we have the push option for the winch in this game, it's way easier to do this. Now the next tip. In expeditions, towing vehicles is very difficult, and the vehicles that you're towing, they get stuck on rocks and things like that a lot. One of the good things that you can do in these kind of situations is to tuck the vehicle that you're towing. Again, because of the push option that we have for the winch, it's easier to do this, but all you need to do is to increase the length of the winch and get a bit close to the vehicle that you're towing, and then start accelerating as fast as you can and give that vehicle a nice tug. Alright, tip number 4, I think. Low tire pressure whenever you're stuck. If you wanna climb some area with tons of rocks or things like that, low tire pressure is such a good way to make that climb easier. And even if you're stuck in some deep mud, low tire pressure can help you to get out of that muddy area. Alright, the next tip. Selling items or storing items. At the end of your expeditions or when you're returning to the HQ, you automatically sell all the items that you have in your inventory. But is it better to sell them or store them? In one of my tips, I mentioned that if you hire the manager, you would sell your common items for 30% more money and you would purchase them for 10% less money. So if you have the manager, sell the item. You don't need to spend time going back to your outpost or recover or things like that. Just return to the HQ and you're fine. But if you found any of the removable anchors, it's better to store them in the warehouse of your outpost. Because those removable anchors, you can use them all the time and you don't need to buy more anchors anymore. But for anything else, I would recommend selling them and going back to the HQ. It's faster. Alright, this tip is very simple. When you were done exploring a map and you completed every task or contract and expedition in that map, sell the base modules. You would get 90% of your money back. So always sell the base modules after you were done exploring that map. And the last tip. Go and read all the perks that each specialist have. Some of them can give you really good things, like this specialist that buffs the range of your drone and makes your drone extremely good for exploring an area. So go and read all the perks of these specialists. For some missions, they could be a great help. And that's it for today's video. I see you in the next one.